Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. On this show, we often talk about the emotional and spiritual aspects of aging and end-of-life care. But today, we're focusing on something just as important: finding the right living situation for our aging loved ones. It's a topic that can be overwhelming with so many options and decisions to make. I'm excited to have Mike Scoggin with us today. Mike is a senior living advisor and owner of Oasis Senior Advisors of Silicon Valley. He understands the complexities and emotional weight that comes with these decisions, and he's here to guide us through it all, from understanding the different types of senior living communities to navigating the financial aspects and making the transition as smooth as possible. We'll also be addressing some common misconceptions that might be holding you back from finding what you need. Whether you're in the early stages of considering senior care or already far along in the process, this episode can help you. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's start the conversation. Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
So can you start off by telling us your journey to becoming a senior living advisor?
Yeah, it was pretty unlikely. My career, I came out to Silicon Valley with my electronics degree to work in Silicon Valley and to make, semiconductors, chips, which was a good career for a while. But in the early 2000s, things got a little dicey. And so right around 2015, 2016, I decided, I need to do something else. And so I went to a franchise broker looking to do my own business. And when you go through the personality profile, she said, you would be a good senior living advisor, which I really hadn't heard of up to that point, even though I had placed both my parents into senior communities before that. So as I went through and kind of examined my choices, I thought, this does fit who I am. It fits my character.
That's wonderful. So tell us, because before I became an end-of-life doula, I had never heard of what a senior living, or I've never heard of a senior living advisor. So tell us, what does a senior living advisor do?
So the other common name for senior living advisor is placement agency, senior placement. And so this is all about working with seniors and working with their families on that transition from when they're going to leave their home, typically their house, and move into a senior community. And that is something to be very well considered because it's a big decision. But that's why you really need an expert to help you navigate the whole process, because the senior living landscape is very complex, something I wasn't aware of when I was doing it with my own parents.
Now, that's interesting because even though I'm an end-of-life doula, if when the time comes, I know that I won't be able to doula on my own through that myself. So I would hire another doula. Do you find that other senior living advisors, that even though they have all of this knowledge, that when it really comes down to it and they're working with their families, that even they pull in senior living advisors?
Well, that's a good question. And I see what you mean by having, as you're a barber, you don't want to do your own haircut.
Yeah.
And so maybe when my time comes, I may do that. But then again, I do feel like I've got a pretty good perspective having worked this business for about 9 years.
Yeah. What specific services do you offer?
So the way my process typically works is I get a call from a family member or from the senior, and I arrange a consultation. I try to arrange a face-to-face in-person consultation. That's the most effective because I can really gather a lot of information about the needs, the preferences, the lifestyle of the individual. And I can also describe that landscape and give the person a pretty good idea of what's out there, because there's a lot of misconceptions that go along with senior living. And the most common stereotype, of course, is the nursing home, which is the old folks' home. And that's we see it in media all the time, where people are looking at the rocking chairs and the tongues hanging out, things like that. And so I have an opportunity at that point to help dispel some of the myths and overcome some of the stereotypes. So that's the first part. The process is the consultation. From there, I develop a report that shows my client the best fits for what they're talking about, from what their needs are, from a pricing standpoint, from a geography standpoint. And using my engineering background, I developed a tool that's very helpful for my clients on showing them all this information in one place. And most of my clients love that. From that report, we narrow down the list of the places that we're going to go visit. And so this is kind of the short list. For me, I usually take my clients on tours about 7 to 8 places on average. And that's a lot. But you do that over 2 days and you kind of chop it up. But it's important to have 2 days of tours, because after the first day, I do a debriefing with my client to really understand what their impressions and their feedback, to I get a better idea. So I might fine tune the next day's tours with different places based on what their feedback was. After the tours, we go through and work through what their feelings are and where they're leaning. And I always help them with the decision process. Part of that, I was told my client just last week, if you really got 2 different choices, you're not sure which one you want to go with, this is a technique I learned a while ago. You take a coin, you assign a result to both sides of the coin. The coin's not going to decide your decision. But what you do is you flip the coin and you monitor your own feelings at the result. So if you're disappointed, then that's not the right choice. If you're happy about it, that's the way you should go. So that's part of deciding where to go. There's follow-up visits. There's different things going on with that. Part of my process is also helping make sure my clients get the best price available. And because I'm the expert in the area here, and pretty much a wide area, I can help them negotiate the best deal possible. So that's another part of my service. And then I even have resources to help with the transition itself. So the physical move, I'm not really hauling boxes. Well, I have done that. But anyway, I arrange resources to help my clients move, the physical move, and then I check up afterwards to make sure their transition was smooth and they're adapting. It's always an adjustment. So you got to just make sure everything is good. And if it's not, then we can revamp and try something else. So it's kind of the whole soup to nuts type of a service from the very beginning to until the client is perfectly comfortable and settled in. That's when I know I'm done.
So it's interesting that you mention the misconception about what an assisted living facility is or senior care facility is, because I think since we were younger, that those assisted living communities, those senior living communities have changed so much. And yes, it used to be that those were the places that you went to die. I mean, it was really, but now when I've done tours, these are places I would love to move in now. I'd love to move into them now. They're so some of them are amazing to the facilities.
The way to think about it, these are retirement communities. They're not, nursing homes. As a matter of fact, nursing home is a bit of a misnomer anymore, because you've got skilled nursing facilities where you get medical treatments and you get rehab, and there's therapies, physical therapy, occupational therapy. If you need transfusions, if you need a feeding tube, if you need a respirator, if you need these medical treatments, you go to a skilled nursing facility. That's not where you go to live. You live in a retirement community, and with a lot of the retirement communities, there's assistance. Those are the assisted living communities. And then there's other options to live in a retirement community and still have assistance, but it's not with the staff, it's an outside caregiver. So that's another one of the complexities of different options. But the bottom line is really the social things are changing, that people are living longer. And so because we're going to be around a long time, we have to find places to live that will accommodate what we need down the road. And that's the retirement communities and the assisted living communities. And of course, there's other flavors for people with dementia. There's the memory care communities. And then really at the very end, you can go to a house, which is called a board and care home, or sometimes it's called just a care home. And that's where people go when they're not really benefiting from the activities and the services that you get at the larger communities. And typically, that's when someone has a hospice diagnosis And you don't have to be in a skilled nursing facility when you're on hospice. That's changed. Now you can be at any place you want to go when you're on hospice, and they send hospice nurses and caregivers to you wherever you are. And this is part of what Medicare is deliberately changing to keep people from living in skilled nursing facilities. Long-term care is really at the communities and no longer at the skilled nursing facilities.
I know that you mentioned the skilled nursing facility. I know that some places that people can move into, it's like all encompassing. They move into a place that is where they don't need assistance, where, they don't need the help, but eventually, so they just move into the apartment. When they do need help, they could get assistance. They don't have to move. And there are even places, and then of course, that help increases. And then, as you mentioned, hospice can come in when and if that is needed. There are also places that do have that skilled nursing facility. I know that, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring up facilities around here for people who are listening to this that live out of the area, but there are places like Saratoga Retirement Community, which they run the whole entire gamut, and they do have that skilled nursing facility. I think that was the only one that I ran into around here that has that. But it's really interesting, the different levels of care, uh, and that some of them have the independent living. I'm curious about, there are places that are nonprofit, and there are places that are for profit in this arena. Is there a big difference between those as far as what they provide?
I'd like to back up to talk about like the Saratoga community you mentioned. That's a continuum care retirement community. It is one of the earliest retirement communities that was formed pretty much in the 70s, couple formed in the 60s even. And the conventional assisted living community really came around in the 80s. But in the 60s, 70s, the CCRCs, the continuum care retirement communities, they were established to help people really have the full continuum of care. You can move in when you're independent. There's assisted living there on the campus. There's a memory care, and there's a skilled nursing on the campus. And so this gave people a lot of comfort that they would be able to transition from one stage to the next on the same campus with the same company, and that the company would be taken care and they wouldn't be dependent on their family members to help them, navigate and transition from different places. So that's a model that still exists and still very comforting for people because they have a skilled nursing on campus, where the assisted living communities, they don't have skilled nursing. They have all the caregivers that are providing the assistance for the normal activities of daily living. So that's mobility and it's medication management and things like that. And when someone needs skilled nursing in an assisted community, they go down the street. When you're in a CCRC, you can go across the campus. And so for some people, it's more of a comfort knowing that you can go across the campus. But the difference is that now, in the last couple of decades, you don't live in the skilled nursing facility. And so the CCRC model is starting to dry up a bit. In fact, there are CCRCs that are converting their skilled nursing facilities. I'm going to call those SNFs, skilled nursing facility. They're converting their SNFs to assisted living because they don't really need SNFs anymore because people aren't staying there for long term. And so there isn't the same kind of advantage that there was back in the 60s and 70s. And so the CCR model is kind of, well, it's not going away, but they're not building new ones anymore. That's the most of the new properties are assisted living.
Now, I know that a lot of assisted living and even straight retirement communities, that they do have rooms, or they do have in buildings, they have places in their buildings where physical therapy can happen and occupational therapy. Is that really the norm, and that's how people are getting assistance?
Yeah, and now that's exactly right. So for your physical therapy and occupational therapy, again, Medicare is trying to get you out of that SNF. And so the PT and the OT therapists are coming to wherever you are. And yeah, you can be at your own home or you're in an assisted living community, and the communities, they have studios set up for the PT and OT people to come in, where they have certain fitness equipment and different therapy, machines to help with that therapy. And that is something that's more and more common. In fact, there's visiting podiatrists that have been going around for a while, but now there's concierge doctors that are doing house calls, and doctors are going into the communities and meeting all the residents there, so the residents don't have to go out to their doctor's appointments anymore. The doctor comes to them. So the assisted living community is becoming really more of a standardized model to help people from having to be in the medical system. You can be at home and the medical system comes to you. That's from the therapy, and obviously the assistance with daily living, but the doctors, the podiatrists, and the hospice people all come to the residents now.
Okay. So let's just take a step back, and I want to ask what the different options are so people really understand that there's not just one type of living community, and we didn't define those at the beginning.
Yeah, and so that is a bit of the complexity, that there's a lot of different options, which is good because everybody's different. Everybody's got their own set of priorities and their circumstances. So the basic kind of the more popular model, and right here it's called the Villages in San Jose. There's Rossmore and Walnut Creek, and the larger ones are the chains like I don't know, I can't remember right now, but these are retirement communities or retirement villages. And what you're doing, you move out of your house when you retire, and you sell your house, and then you buy a condo or a duplex or a cottage in one of these. Oh, Del Webb was the one I was thinking of, and there's a leisure world in Southern California. So these are very large villages that are for 55 and older. They're called 55 active adult. So that has everybody there is retired and doing golf and swimming. Here in San Jose, you can do horseback riding. They have, the different clubs, so they're very active. Active adults. When you retire, you don't need to live in the house anymore. Then you can downsize and go enjoy your retirement in one of these communities. What they don't have is a strong caregiving network. So when people really need assistance with the mobility and things like that, they can still get that, but they typically will migrate to a different place at some point. So the next level of senior communities is called an independent living senior community. And this is the same type of thing. You have to be 55 to get in. But these, they're not purchased anymore. You're not purchasing a condo. You're going into basically an apartment building, and you're paying a monthly rent, and it's month to month, but which means there are no leases. With senior communities, people are moving out involuntarily a lot, so they don't have any kind of leases to worry about. And by the same token, when you move into a senior community that's a month to month, you're paying an upfront move-in fee, which they call usually a community fee or an entry fee, and you're not paying last month's rent and a security deposit and a damage deposit, kind of the normal things for a regular apartment, but you just pay the upfront fee, which covers refurbishing the apartment and their administrative costs. And actually that helps pay for my services as well. My percentage comes out of that. And it's very simple. And so the independent living communities, they're different from the retirement communities because they provide meals and services to all the residents. Typically, it's 3 meals a day. It can be 2 meals, depending on the community. And you get meals and housekeeping, weekly housekeeping, and they typically do your sheets and your towels. So, linens service every week, and you can either do your own laundry, you can pay them to do your laundry, but basically everything is done for you. You don't have to do any cooking or cleaning or chores because they even provide transportation. So if you do go to your doctor appointment, you want to go shopping, you want to go to the bank, they will drive you. You don't need a car anymore. So this really is just very carefree living, these are the independent communities, they don't have caregivers on the staff. So, but a lot of the people that live in the independent communities, they still have caregivers coming in. They're from third-party caregiver companies.
Mm.
And so the communities have arrangements. They're not partnerships because there's no real legal agreement or anything, but they will work with certain caregiving companies to go in and take care of their residents on a regular basis. So then the next level is the assisted living community, and that's kind of the mainstream, the conventional. Most of the new communities being built are assisted living, and that's where you get meal services and caregivers on the staff. So you move into your apartment and you can be independent. You need no care. You don't pay for any care. But whenever you need care, the caregivers are there available and they just start up a care plan, and then you get an extra charge depending on whatever you need. Typically, you start off with, I need somebody to manage my medications because it's too complicated. And so the caregiver's right there. They come in every day. And so the care is available for all the different levels, depending on what you need. And in the assisted living communities, they usually, not all of them, they usually have a secure memory care unit on site. So if the resident becomes disoriented and they've got more advanced level dementia, then there's the transition into that unit, which is not very disruptive because they're usually not sure where they are. So you've got memory care on site, and then they've got all the other care levels available, including hospice. But if you need to recoup, to recover from your surgery, that's when you go to the SNF after you've had your surgery in the hospital. But then you come back to your apartment, and again, the physical therapists and the different service staff come to you. So the assisted living is kind of the mainstream. The other type of community is well, it's called a dedicated memory care community where all the residents have a dementia diagnosis. And those really are the best places for people with dementia to get the kind of stimulation and the care level that they need, because they are dedicated just to that type of resident. So that's where it's a little more expensive typically. And the level after that is the board and care homes we just touched on. These are basically houses, and some are larger houses, some are duplexes, or some are small apartment buildings. But the vast majority of a board and care home is 6 residents. That's kind of how California sets up the ratio: 6 residents with 2 caregivers during the day and 1 that stays overnight. And it's a home, so you get a very homey environment, but you kind of you lose out on the activities and the stimulation.
Mm.
So most of the care homes is people that are not benefiting from being the assisted living communities, where you do have regular daily activities, and there's entertainment, and there's outings, and there's different the exercise classes every morning. So there's different ways they keep the residents very stimulated in the assisted living communities. But when you're not benefiting from that, then you can go to a board and care home. Typically, people that are bedbound, they can't really get out of bed anymore. That's the better place for them to go. It's less expensive. So that's another option to consider. Or if you have somebody that really prefers a homey environment where the other 5 residents are more like family members, they become, close friends, and there's some bonding there. And so you've got a homey environment. The unfortunate thing is usually there's dementia involved. With advanced dementia, the interactive skills get hit. So there's less conversation, but sometimes that's, really what the resident is comfortable with. So those are really the different levels depending on what the functionality is of the resident.
Yeah.
They can go to these different types of communities. And of course, each community is different. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, but that, again, that's my business to help find the best fit for my clients.
Now, the board and care homes and the memory care, um, that is not for a spouse and their loved one. That is, at that point, they're not living together. Is that correct? All the other options, you live with your spouse if that person is still with you, and it's like an apartment. But those 2 other options that we just mentioned, those are really your spouse isn't living with you. Is that correct?
Well, that's a great question. And this has been coming up more and more frequently with my clients, where there's a married couple that wants to stay together. But there's two different functional levels. So one spouse is usually younger and more functional, and the other spouse is older, and dementia is either starting to creep in or it's already there. And so there are more and more situations where I can find accommodations for that couple to live in the same apartment.
Mm.
And you have to get creative, and not every community, there are certain communities that say, no, we have a policy, we don't do that. And so I keep track of who's got the open policies and who doesn't. But the most common situation is that the couple can move into a regular assisted living apartment, and the one that's less functional is getting more attention from the caregivers that are coming to the apartment. And of course, the spouse is keeping track of their less functional partner. And it usually works out pretty well that the less functional resident can stay in an assisted living apartment and still get the kind of care that they need. Certain communities, and I'll throw in a plug here. My favorite memory care community is Belmont Village, because they have a program called the Circle of Friends that deals with this very scenario. And that's as most of the assisted living communities, you've got the regular apartments, then you've got the memory care, and Belmont is the one that has a intermediate level program that deals with early dementia, mild cognitive impairment. It really is the best for these couples that I call mixed couples, because it's mixed, functional and non. And the Circle of Friends provides that stimulation on a daily basis, even the weekends, and keeps that one resident very engaged, and the functional resident can go off and do whatever they want. And so that there are different communities that have different strengths along those lines, and the communities are aware of this need, and they are trying to accommodate the early stage dementia and the mixed couples, and some are better than others, but I'm just mentioning the Belmont is pretty much they're there.
Yeah, I liked that about Belmont. Now, I don't do what you do for a living, but I have, helped uh, friends and with this, and um, I like them. I like the Carleton because of the type of training also that they received. I know the Teepa Snow is the gold standard in that type of training. So these communities that have memory care, I mean, they've received really good training, the majority of them. And it's such an advantage to be in one of these communities, knowing that your loved one, if they need it, they can get that.
Well, the research and the advances we've made in memory care are really dramatic in the last couple of decades. It's been very well, including some of the new medications that are coming out. So the Alzheimer's Association is doing a great job raising money and conducting research. But the training is so much better than it was even 30 years ago. And our grandparents were pretty much getting drugged when their behavior became unreasonable or unmanageable, and that was the answer. You didn't really have any other techniques available, but now there's so much better training, and Teepa Snow is a great example, but there are others who have developed some great programming. There's local resources that I work with that do these dementia support groups for family members, and there's a lot of great resources available to help people with this dementia, which is becoming more common. And it's not just because people are living longer, and so it's going to become more apparent, but it's also increasing at a higher rate that they're trying to understand. There's a higher rate of dementia in young people than there used to be. So this is something that has to do with environmental factors and our diet and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because people think that dementia is just an old person's disease, but as you said, people are getting younger and younger and having it. I mean, I've heard of 20-year-old, early
Yeah,
30, early
yeah.
onset dementia is uh, you know, is what it's
That's pretty
called. So
tragic. Yeah, because it's not a reversible condition. So
no,
but it is, by the way, and here's just, I've been giving talks recently about cognitive decline and dementia, and the latest research says that cognitive decline is a natural thing. We're all going to have it as we get older, but dementia is largely preventable. So there are different things. You have to be very deliberate about it. And again, I could, um, share my presentation sometime, but it's pretty fascinating, the kinds of things that are in our control to help at least slow down the advance, if not avoid it altogether.
I'd love to get more information on that, of course, for myself and my husband and my parents. So we'll talk after this. Um, so what are some of the common challenges that families face when they're trying to find the best option for them?
Yeah, the most common challenge is, well, we kind of touched on the fact that the vast majority of seniors, really almost 9 out of 10 seniors, do not want to leave home. They're going to stay in that house until the end. I'm not going out here except for feet first. And this is more common with men than women, but it really is about 9 out of 10 people in the United States, and maybe even across the planet, that really, and they all say the same thing. I'm not going to go to one of those places with a bunch of old people. And this is a 92-year-old saying that, right? And so this is the greatest challenge, is that the stigma attached with nursing homes and the old folks' homes. And so the stereotype is still prevalent. And you and I know these places, these retirement communities are resorts, and there's 5-star dining, and they treat you like royalty with the services and the care provided and the entertainment coming in and the outings. Anyway, it's the stereotype needs to shift, and it is shifting, but it's still going to take probably a couple more decades before people really get that stigma out of their head. So that's the biggest challenge. Well, Mike, we talked to mom and she seems receptive. Okay, let's start looking. Well, we did pick a great place, but we took mom there and she refuses to move. She just doesn't want to leave home.
Yep.
And so that is, and then, after a while, mom still does decline, where if she'd moved into a community, she would be thriving. She would be enjoying and really extending her lifespan. They've done studies where it's at least 4.5 years you add to your lifespan on average by going into a community. And it's really a lot, a lot longer than that. There's people that I run into these communities that are hitting triple digits that have been in these communities like 12, 15 years because they went into a community and they've got the lifestyle advantage there. So
The number one indicator of aging well is that social aspect that people, as you get older, you miss. I mean, everyone, I mean, even people who are in their 30s or 40s feel this because, they're not in school. They're not, many move away from where they were living in the state. How do you make friends as an adult? It's really difficult, and it only gets harder as you get older. So having that built-in community, that social aspect is so healthy.
oh, it's there's the paradox too, because people resist the change. They don't want to leave their familiar home, and they don't want to go to a strange place with a bunch of old people. But then they start recognizing they are starting to lose their memory, which is a natural thing, and that's the cognitive decline, that you're not as sharp as you were when you're 25, and so things don't come to you. And so the paradox is they start feeling self-conscious about interacting with other people. And so that becomes this huge barrier. Oh no, I can't go and be in all these other people where they're going to make fun of me because I can't remember something. Well, everybody's in the same boat, right? So that's what people don't understand, is that you go in with people your same age, they all have the same problems you do, and they all feel the same level of self-conscious, but they all bond together because you're in that boat. You're all in the same boat. So it's difficult for a lot of people to overcome these apprehensions, their fear of the unknown. And the trick is really to try and get them to at least try it out. So that's part of my job, is to help overcome that main challenge, that main barrier, that the resident, the senior, really doesn't want to leave home. But it's interesting. So 9 out of 10 people don't want to leave home. But what's the number one complaint of all seniors? The
They're
number one
lonely.
complaint, they're lonely, is loneliness. Well, how do you overcome that? Well, if everybody would come visit me, I'd be fine. My family, they're so selfish. They're off conducting their own lives. And instead of bringing your son to soccer practice, you can bring my grandson to see me. So it's, these expectations, or really, again, they have certain hopes of how things can be, but reality needs to be the check here on, you really have to take care of yourself. You
Yeah.
can't expect people to come in and recover your loneliness. If you're feeling lonely, you need to go where people are.
Yeah.
And humans are very social animals.
Yes, we are. Now, do you ever run? I'm sure you do. So I'm going to ask, how do you handle when you have family members, more than one daughter or son that's helping mom and dad, and they have differing opinions? So there's that family dynamic. You must run into that a lot.
Yeah, pretty much, the dysfunctional family, uh, my phrase is, there's no such thing as a functional family.
Yeah.
Although I have been surprised on a few times where the family does really team up and everybody's on the same page. It does happen, but more commonly, you've got family members and they all have different perspectives. They all have different ideas of what's best for the parent. And of course, the stigma, oh no, we're not putting mom in one of those places. No
Yeah.
way. No, she's going to stay in her nice, comfortable home, and we're going to arrange people to come take care of her, which they don't really understand how that caregiving works. So family members, and so yeah, the question is, how do you get family members to kind of reconcile? Well, we start off, okay, we're going to bring the caregivers in to take care of mom. So there's the reputable, the bonded licensed companies. They want a 4 hour minimum per visit, and it's about $45 an hour now. So it's like, 170, $180 a day for one visit. And then it kind of goes up from there. If you need more than 4 hours, or you need two visits, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, okay, now we're at 350, $400 a day. And the more care you need, then of course it gets more and more expensive until you're up at, $15,000-$20,000 a month pretty easily. If you want 24/7, it's going to be about $33,000 a month.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, you've got a caregiver that might be there with you, but you're not overcoming the loneliness barrier, unfortunately. Some of the caregivers are better than others. Some are very engaging, but most of the caregivers, the English is a second language, and they're doing a wonderful job. They're providing a great service, but they're not really hired to be conversational and companions.
Yep.
So even though you might have a caregiver, you're still not getting the social interaction that's very important for older people. So at the end of it, the whole family dynamic is something that's very uh, difficult with families sometimes.
When should a person start planning for, start looking into moving into a senior, either a senior living community, when should people start this journey or start thinking about it? Like, I know personally, for me, just because I'm a planner, I started thinking about this in my 30s, knowing that it's far down. It's really far down the ways. But when is a good time to start thinking about it, to start having conversations with your loved one, if you're married or if you're living with someone?
So I think it was in your talk when I attended yesterday that you mentioned that when somebody gets a driver's license, that's when they should start planning for different types of eventualities. And so it is the well, the main thing is the fact that since we're living longer and things are different for us than it was for our grandparents and even our parents to a certain extent, that we need to start thinking about later life. early on. And this is something that schools should really start to help, educate people on things to have in mind, because I still run into people that are thinking, oh yeah, when I retire, I'm just gonna, my Social Security is gonna take care of me and I'll be fine. I'm gonna live in my house and Social Security, and and then I'll pass away peacefully in my sleep at some point, and everything will be nice and clean. And there's people with that mindset. And so anyway, we need to start shifting the awareness of what it means to be getting older, and still you're older, but now you're not independent anymore. Now you need help with things. Well, that's going to cost money. So you really, yeah, your 30s is be a great time to really start planning and maybe trying to find a long-term care insurance policy. And the trying to find part means that the insurance companies in the last couple of decades, they've started pulling that product off of their menu. They're not offering that as an option anymore, that policy, because they're losing money,
Mm.
because people are living longer and they're drawing more on that benefit. And so the insurance companies say, okay, we're not going to offer that anymore. So there's only a handful of insurance companies that still offer it. And if you're older, those premiums are very expensive. So if you start younger and you just make these payments, then it's very painless for you when you've got a great paycheck and you're going along, and it'll help you down the road. So you should start think about what the finances are. And I actually have another presentation that deals with that kind of planning thing. So yeah, it's earlier the better to start thinking. Of course, to start looking at and exploring communities. Well, I have clients that are very independent. They're in their 70s, and they can be fine in their homes for next 5 to 10 years, but they would like to start checking things out, and that's great. They want to see what's out there, and that helps to kind of adjust their expectations and their perspectives on things. So that's perfect. So
Let's talk about the money since we're starting to lead into it. And I totally agree with you on the long term care. We actually had someone on the show that talked about long term care. The person I actually got long term care insurance for, which I was very fortunate because I had parents who talked about it with me. Most people do not know about it. So I was very, very fortunate. Um, yeah, I know most people think that they are going to live at home forever. They'll have a quick death. I'm sorry, that only really happens to 20% of us. So most of us are in that 80% where we will have a slow decline and eventually pass away. But we'll go through a lot before we pass away. Um, but many people are like, okay, I will just hire someone to take care of me and I'll pay them $10 an hour, and that is just not realistic. It is so expensive, especially when with people who dementia is becoming much more prevalent. And so there'll be a time where you do need someone, maybe even two people, to take care of your loved one 24 hours a day. And then if they become violent, then you are going to need to move to a memory care facility. So it's a problem that we have in our society, avoiding these discussions. Let's talk about finances. Let's talk about the reality of how expensive these places are, because they are expensive.
yeah, we definitely launch into that. But one thing you touched on, I can get a caregiver for $10 an hour. You actually can. Those people are on Craigslist, and
Mm.
they are criminals. There's a huge industry of getting a caregiver on Craigslist that says, "Oh, Mrs. Smith, I'd love to come in and help you out here. Let me help you. Oh, let's go dust off your jewelry here. Let's go clean this jewelry. Oh, let's take your checkbook over here to the bank. But you just need to write this check because it's a very important thing. Your son wants you to write this check."
Mm.
And so there's scams that are rampant, that are people that are caregivers going into the home, and they are cleaning out these seniors because the seniors are looking for a less expensive caregiver. You have to go, somebody coming to your home, they've got to be licensed and bonded. It's not worth the risk unless it's a family member. Even then, family members are cleaning out their own family.
Yeah.
So there's family members you can't trust either. So it's a nasty thing.
And
So
also to be a caregiver is a lot to ask from a person. It is a real lot. So to expect a family member to do that,
oh, that's a
that's unfair.
statistic too, right? There's most of the family or most of the caregivers in the country are family members.
Yeah.
And it's something like 80% are family members. They're not paid. They're typically going to be the female. It's going to be the daughter or the wife or the sister, and the rate of decline for the caregiver is greater than the caree, than the person they're taking care of. And so there's a lot of statistics, studies that show that the caregivers, the health declines a lot faster than the senior does. So it's really something to be aware of. Um, Back to finances, the caregivers, the licensed and bonded, and here in the Bay Area, it's if you can get $42 an hour, that's going to be pretty good right now. And of course, inflation just keeps ratcheting up. But that's there's different ways. Oh, there is a new thing I just heard of where the college campuses are arranging for college students to go in and do caregiving. And this is brand new, and I'm not gonna remember the name of it, but people can ask me for that resource. I think this is a legitimate channel where the college student is getting some college credits for providing this care, and the senior is getting a lot lower cost care. And it's not the trained type of caregiver, but when they need companionship, and the conversation is going to be a lot better. So anyway,
And that's
there are
non-medical. It's
it's
non-medical.
always non-medical,
Okay.
yeah, because the main thing we're talking about is caregivers coming in for the mobility things and for medication management and for incontinence. They're helping with different types of toileting and showering and hygiene things. So that's non-medical. If someone needs medical care, there's home health companies where a nurse will go in, or maybe a med tech with medical training to work with a resident, a senior, but that's going to be a lot more expensive. You've got that kind of medical training. So that's another thing where sometimes it does make sense to go into a SNF if you need a lot of medical care, but you can have the nurse come to you. A lot of times that's with the daily injections for insulin. So
Are those
that kind of,
covered by like Medicare or anything like that? Where does
well,
insurance?
Medicare is going to cover to a certain extent, but if you want somebody to come to your house and give you daily injections, Medicare is going to go, we can only cover so much. This is not my forte, so we'd have to talk to somebody else. But clearly, Medicare is hurting financially, and they're going to be very selective on what they pay for.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, as far as finances, getting the same care level in a community, well, the 24/7 care, you can figure around $33,000 to $35,000 a month. If you go to an assisted living community, the caregiver's there 24/7. They're going to respond to your call button on your pendant or your bracelet, and they are providing care that the same thing the in-home care people are doing. And the apartments around Silicon Valley here, you get a studio apartment for around $5,000, and then the care on top of that is going to be $3,000 or $4,000 depending on the level. And so you can be under $10,000 for 24/7 care versus $35,000 for somebody 24/7 in your home.
And that includes a lot of places food, and it includes someone cleaning once a week. So there are a lot of and people to talk to and
Exactly. That's all the licensed assisted living communities by law. They have to provide 3 meals a day. They have to provide weekly housekeeping, and they have to provide utilities, all the other services, and they have to provide transportation. And of course, then there's the outings and entertainment activities. So it's a kind of, that for the $10,000 or less, that pays for everything except your medications and your toothpaste. Everything is covered.
as far as that 24/7, do some places do better than others? And what I mean is, do they have the correct staff or the numbers to support that? What should people be looking for in that arena?
Yeah. So the pandemic took a big hit on us as a society. Um, and there's a lot of labor shortage in the care community right now. There's a lot of people that were caregivers before the pandemic that either found some other kind of work, and they, once the pandemic kind of stabilized, a lot of those people didn't want to come back because there is still chance for getting infected and so forth with the virus. So staff shortage is across the board. It's hitting the SNFs the hardest
Mm.
because they're not paying very well. And so that's typically the worst care level right now is unfortunately in the skilled nursing facilities. The typically you get what you pay for.
Mm.
If it costs a little more for this community, that's not because they've got a much nicer facility necessarily. It's probably because they're paying their staff more. And it's staff retention and it's a better ratio of staff to residents. So the state basically says they have to provide enough staff to cover the needs of the residents. And so that doesn't come up with a ratio per se, but it's always a good question to ask communities. What would you say your staff to resident ratio is? And they'll be reluctant to come up with a number, but if they say it's 1 to 9 or 10, you say, okay, that's not really the kind of care level that I consider to be a higher number or a better number, because it should be more like one staff every 5 or 6 residents. That's a much better ratio.
What
And so but it is difficult. And again, it's the staff retention right now is the biggest challenge for the communities. So,
it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I did ask when I was visiting, I did ask, what is your staff, what is your nurse to client, or ratio, resident ratio, and some refused. I mean, the salespeople would give a runaround. It depends how many people we have. We hire to the number of residents, and just really skirted around that issue. And then they were if they didn't answer, if they weren't transparent, they were off the list.
yeah, it's a difficult question for them to answer because they don't want to get pinned down
Yeah.
with certain ratios, and people call in sick and they go on vacations, and it's a struggle for a community. And that's where you kind of listen for what the different reviews and the different complaints are. And this is something I track for my clients on a kind of regular basis. I go to the social services department for California every month, and I get all the citations downloaded, and so I can keep track of how much trouble they're in with the state. And not every month, but periodically I go to the internet and I scrape off the public reviews and ratings, so I can keep track on a 5-star level how well they're doing on the star level from the different public websites. And I can provide this as kind of an overall score to my clients as part of my service, which is a very useful part of that tool. It's something my clients really love.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask one last question, because we're at the end of our time already. Wow. Um, are there any financial resources that are available for people, and specifically for veterans also, because they are in a very different situation than most?
Yeah, so vets have a pension plan called the aid and attendance pension for assisted living. Attendance like you're attending someone. So it's something that the VA doesn't advertise. I've never heard a vet say, "Oh yeah, the VA volunteered that this is available," but it is something, and it's for the vets that need more financial help. If you've got a vet that's really doing well, they're not going to qualify. But there is programs or assisted living for vets and their spouses. So it doesn't help, family members other than the spouse, but for the vets. And even if the vet has passed away, the surviving spouse can get the VA benefits, aid and attendance, and I have resources to help people apply for that, because you don't want to go right in to the VA. You need to use one of these services to help. Financial assistance for non-vets, we get into the zone, instead of Medicare, you go to Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid for the rest of the country. So in California, we're clever, we call it Medi-Cal.
We're so special here. We're so
Yes,
special.
we're special. So it's low-income medical insurance for people that need that kind of affordability. And it's the way you do it is, first you get qualified for Medi-Cal, but that helps you with your operations and doctor visits and medications, but it doesn't help for your living expenses. So if you need assisted living and you're low income, you have to then apply after Medi-Cal. You have to get the assisted living waiver, which is another thing that I have resources for all this. And the assisted living waiver, and both of these applications take some months, especially after the pandemic. But if you get the assisted living waiver, then you'll be able to use that waiver to find a community, an assisted living community that takes that waiver as payment. And basically, Medi-Cal pays for whatever you can't afford on what they're charging. And it's a great thing for low-income seniors. The unfortunate thing is there's very few participating facilities in Northern California. It's much better outside the Bay Area. Southern California, there are a lot more participating facilities that take the waiver than there are here in Santa Clara County. There's only 4 facilities that accept the waiver. One of those isn't open to the public. The other one has a closed wait list, and the other 2, the wait list is around a year and a half. And so it's pretty much similar in San Mateo County. Santa Cruz County doesn't have any. And so there's just in this area, it's because of the great economy here that the facilities don't want to participate in this program, because they can't really run their facility on those payments that they're going to get from Medi-Cal. The only good news here is that about a year and a half ago, 2 years in January, there's a new initiative they started called CalAIM, and they're trying to reform the Medi-Cal program. So California is recognizing that it's not working. There's a lot of people that are low income that are not getting the care they need. And so they're trying to reform the program, which is a multi-year program. Of course, it's going to be. And at least they're working on it, though. That's something.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and all the information that you shared. Thank you. Before we wrap up, can you let everyone know how they can learn more about you and what you do and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about my service is I'm always free to my clients. And that's, of course, my clients love it. And that's where I get a lot of low income experience, because there are people that call me that really, they don't have the money, but I can still help them. I'm free to my clients because I'm compensated by the community, the private pay community, when my client moves in with that kind of a finder's fee, referral fee. And so the best thing to do is to call me on my business line, and I'll tell you what it is. Of course, I should be able to pull it up on the screen. It's 650-933-3336. So you've got 5 3s in a row there. And it's
I'll post that in the description.
It's a pretty symmetrical number. So that'd be the best way to get hold of me. And of course, if you give them my email as well, and I'm happy to get together for a consultation, give you an idea what the landscape is, and help you explore the whole thing.
Thank you. Folks, finding the right living option for you and your loved one can be overwhelming, but you don't have to do it alone. Whether you're just beginning this journey or facing a tough decision, remember that resources like Mike are out there to guide you. The right support can make a big difference. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.